On January 9th, 2022, comedian, actor, director, husband and father, Bob Saget was found dead in his hotel room after performing a comedy show. Bob was a comedian well known for starring in the TV show Full House and Fuller House, as well as American Home Videos, directing movies like Dirty Work, and being in guest appearances on television shows such as Entourage. Bob was out on a comedy tour. He had just finished performing a sold-out show in Orlando. After leaving the theater, he went back to his hotel, spoke with the valet for a few minutes, and then proceeded up to his hotel room. Cameras showed Bob entering the room, nothing out of the ordinary, walking fine. 10 minutes after entering his room, his door opened and he put a do not disturb sign out on the door. And then at 3:43 a.m., he posted to his social media a photo of him on stage talking about how happy he was to be doing stand-up comedy and what a blessing it was, an addiction it was for him. Several hours later, Bob's body was found inside his room. There was an adjoining door that was not locked, but surveillance cameras showed no one entering or leaving the room. And when Bob was found, he was found with his head fractured, black eyes. So we're going to delve into his autopsy report today and find out exactly what happened, because speculation swarmed social media after Bob's death, where people in the medical field had read about what was found and said that those injuries could only be sustained through something like an automobile or motorcycle crash or an extreme assault. So a lot of people have been curious and thought there was foul play without really knowing what all the circumstances were. So let's go ahead and dive into this autopsy and see what we can find. The autopsy report was conducted by the Office of the Medical Examiner, District 9 of Orlando, Florida, for decedent Robert Saget. Manner of death, accident, identified by photo identification. He was age 65 years old, sex male, race white, date of death January 9th, 2022. Time of autopsy the following day, January 10th, 2022 at 9:15 a.m. The autopsy findings, and forgive some of my pronunciations, but blunt force trauma injuries to the head, detailed abrasion of the posterior scalp, subgleal hemorrhage underlying the abrasion of the posterior scalp, linear fracture of the base of the skull involving the right occipital bone and right temporal bone, comminuted fractures of the roofs of the orbits involving the bilateral frontal bone. So it's saying that he had bruising in his frontal bone, bilateral partial periorbital enchymoses, subdural hematoma, the right greater than left, it says. It's had hemorrhaging and contusions involving the bilateral frontal lobes and bilateral temporal lobes. Continued findings showed that severe left anterior descending coronary artery and that he was COVID-19 positive. Says no evidence of acute or chronic inflammation by microscopy. Toxicology analysis said in consideration of the circumstances surrounding the death and after examination of the body, toxicology analysis, microscopic analysis, respiratory pathogen panel testing, bilateral lung cultures, and postmortem CT, it is my opinion that the death of Robert Saget, a 65-year-old white male found unresponsive in a hotel room, is the result of blunt head trauma. It is most probable that the decedent suffered an unwitnessed fall backwards and struck the posterior aspect of his head. The manner of death is accident. So I believe at the time of his death, his family was wanting an investigation done and then requested it to stop. I believe his wife did, if I remember correctly. Here we have, it says the autopsy of the body of Robert Saget is performed pursuant to the Florida statute of the medical examiner. The body of Robert Saget is identified via comparison of decedent to the photograph associated with his California driver's license. Clothing and valuables, it says at the time of examination, the decedent is not dressed. A white metal ring is on the 4th digit of the left hand, which is probably his wedding ring. The body is that of a well-developed, well-nourished, 78-inch, 228-pound adult white male, consistent with the reported age of 65. The external examination showed the scalp is covered by up to 9-centimeter long brown hair. The irids are brown and the sclera are white, so his eyes are brown. Conjunctive have no pterygium. The internal nose has no trauma, and the nasal septum is intact. So even though he had bruising around the eyes, there was nothing wrong with his nose. The frenula are intact, and the oral mucosa has no trauma. The teeth are natural and in adequate condition. The neck is unremarkable. The torso has no injuries, congenital deformities, scars, or tattoos. The external genitalia are those of an adult male. The testes are in the scrotum. The anus is unremarkable. The extremities have no injuries, congenital deformities, scars, or tattoos. We get to the evidence of the injury. It says blunt force injuries of the head. The lateral right eye has adjacent focal purple enchymosis. The medial left eye has adjacent focal purple enchymosis. A 2.5 by 3.5 centimeter abrasion is on the posterior scalp, centered 2 inches below the top of the head and a ½ inch right of the posterior midline. Underlying the abrasion is focal subgaleal hemorrhage. The base of the posterior cranial vault has a linear fracture involving the right occipital bone and right temporal bone. The roofs of both orbits involving the bilateral frontal bone have focal comminuted fractures. Approximately 1 milliliter of liquid and partial clotted subdural blood is around the cerebral convexities and cerebellum, and the right is greater than the left. There's hemorrhaging over the posterior aspect of the cerebellum. The cerebral hemispheres have multifocal subarachnoid hemorrhage. The bilateral cerebral hemispheres have multifocal contracoup contusions involving both frontal lobes and temporal lobes. It says the cardiovascular system. The heart is 600 grams and has normal distribution of epicardial fat. The proximal left anterior descending coronary artery has severe atherosclerosis and eccentric narrowing of the lumen up to 95%. The circumflex and right coronary arteries have minimal atherosclerosis and are patent. The right coronary artery is dominant. Cardium is dark red, firm, and has no scars. His respiratory system, the right lung is 900 grams, and the left lung is 870. The surfaces are tan pink and dark red, smooth and glistening. It says the neck, the interior muscles and surrounding soft tissue of the neck have no hemorrhage. The hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage are intact. Head. Injuries to the head are previously described. Epidural hemorrhage is absent. Microscopic examinations showed 10 sections of the lung show intravascular congestion with no acute chronic inflammation present. get over to the toxicology report. So it looks like from the specimens collected, they took peripheral blood. They found no ethanol, no acetone, no methanol, and no isopropanol. Analysis by gas chromatography, headspace injection for blood drug screen says that they found caffeine, trazodone, metabolite, which is probably a dietary. And yeah, that was pretty much it. Those were the dominant, metabolite and caffeine. And then they did a blood immunoassay screen, and it was negative for amphetamines, barbiturates, benzos, all that stuff, cannabinoids, all that. No cocaine, no fentanyl, no opiates. I'm a little surprised that he didn't have any cannabinoids in there. But yeah, nothing there. Sounds like he had a lot of damage to his head and eyes. He had COVID-19, was positive for that, and then had some clogged arteries, but everything else that they tested him on was pretty much negative. Tested him for codeine, morphine, hydrocodone, hydromorphine, oxycodone, and oxymorphone, and none of those were detected either. I believe it says it's a loperamide. That was found in his bloodstream, and it's just noted in here that that is a form of an anti-diarrhea medication or over-the-counter that adults take, and that it's usually just broken down, eliminated through the urine and feces, but that there were elevated reports of this in his system. Basically been a something to control his stomach situation. Unfortunately, with the autopsy report that I found, I was not able to find any diagrams or anything like that. Sometimes they will come along with a diagram of the body and kind of show where the fractures were and where all of that was, and I would be able to give you a better idea of that. But unfortunately, in this case, it did not come with that. It's just such a mystery because the way that they believe it happened was that he fell in his room somewhere, possibly the shower. However, there was no blood anywhere in the room at the time that they found him. He was actually laying on the bed with one arm laying beside him and one arm draped on top of him. And with all that damage to his head and the bones around the face, giving him black eyes. It's been quite curious as to what happened in that hotel room. The official explanation of death is accepted as an accident in his room. He's buried now in Los Angeles at Mount Sinai Jewish Cemetery. He was raised in Philadelphia for the most part, but made his career out in Los Angeles and was survived by a wife and children.